to the floor again. I think someone had a question over here from TJ, and then we'll go time for the last quarter of this thing. Go for it.
Yeah, can you talk about like drilling philosophy, like how at what level of detail do you get like a picture and your working philosophy for like an average, mid-handicap or a
Well, that's a good question. I've never really thought about putting, let's say, short game philosophy to words. Right now, I don't think any short game player. He's on his own. No part of that. He can do whatever it is. But like in terms of like good players, right? And you got a great short game. Probably learn more from Ben about short game than I do teaching for players. In terms of like, let's say, a club player, getting him to understand, interesting enough, attack angle, dynamic loft, spin lofts, low point, and how to manipulate those things to their advantage. So I guess you could say, like, here's the tool, and I'm going to show you what the tool does, and then you can take that and you can apply it in whatever way you need to.
And I love what Leo says. If you go down a driving range and you watch 100 amateurs chip, not one good chipper has a low point that's behind the ball, right? So low point control chipping, we know, needs to be more forward. No one ever has hardly ever does someone have a high attack angle, a steep drop, and struggle with chipping. We're finding that. Shallow is, we're finding is not as nearly as good. So moving low point forward, how do we do that as well? Always do that, but moving low point forward generally in the short game is the best thing people can do.
Let's get controversial. Let's just do it. He's saying no one's ever struggled being too steep. Like those that struggle being too shallow. Yeah, and I would agree. I've never seen anybody struggle in a short game hitting too down on it and low point being too far from it. Just don't see it. I've seen players, to his point, being too close to the ground. Think about, like, for the amateur golfer, what's the most, what's the perpetual thing they hear in terms of, how to hit it better, what they're told when they hit it poorly, right? Stay down on it, your head down, your eye on the ball, stay too close to the ground, and put the club in the ground. So, yeah, to Ben's point, I've never seen anybody struggle and be on that side of the equation. Just lay it out.
Unless they have their own bounce. Unless they have their own bounce.
Well,
If they're carrying too much shaft length in their steep,
there is no balance.
there is no bounce. Correct.
So and again, like each shot is going to need its own deal, but yeah, to that point, like in a lot of ways, balance doesn't matter. Like Victor Hovland has a 6-degree 60 that's shaved down to 4, and he'll hit 12 down with 15 degrees of wind. There's negative bounce. There's the opposite, right? But he's landing the club in the ground after the ball, and it doesn't matter.
Bounce comes into play, we start lowering the handle, exposing bounce because in the bunker it's super important. Flop shots, where we're purposely hitting the ground in front of the ball. That's when bounce comes into play. It doesn't come into play much when we're trying to hit a stock pitch.
And I think that's another additive to that is in the 3D ballistics, the more you get down, the more it has to go left to be 0-ish, right? So when you watch the best short pitchers and chippers of the ball, it looks like it's a little more out, a little more vertical, definitely more vertical down and a little bit more to the left on the way through, just for that particular purpose. I've been very fortunate. I've probably done 25 golf clinics with Stan on it. And I've been very blessed to be around James Seaman. They're both kind of on the other side of the Joe Mayo train. I've watched Stan Utley do amazing work with people, but I've watched Joe Mayo do amazing work with people. But at the end of the day, what it really comes down to me is that, historically speaking, most people hit it fat, followed by 4 consecutive skulls. And most people don't know how to set up to a chip. Most people don't know how to make their body move to make the club perform correctly. And obviously each shot has its own code of But then at the end of the day, for the longest time, and I've sacrificed my game for the benefit of others. And what I mean by that, when stack and tilt became super popular, I've never heard of a front-loading golf swing in my life, but I worked on it for 6 months just to figure it out, because there's going to be somebody that's going to come in that's going to be a front loader. So I felt like my short game got way worse the more time I spent around stand-up, even though I think stand-up is one of the nicest and greatest dudes ever. And all I did was, like, I became like Hormel. I was the king of chili, man. I just couldn't stop hitting it fat while trying to be shallow. Same thing with seat belly. I'm only getting worse. And as soon as I went back to what I was taught when I was a kid, which was exactly what Joe's got me pretty famous for right now, the better I got. And it's just like, you have to know also what your tendencies are. And I have found that if a golfer has a full swing with a lot of right arm action, they're swingers, right? That's going to be kind of how they pitch the golf ball. And if they're like lead arm, what are hitters, they're probably going to be that way too when they're hitting their chip shots. I've never found any success turning somebody who's more right arm dominant into a left arm dominant short gamer and vice versa. So it's all about understanding the human's pattern and tendencies while under duress. And the tighter the lie gets and the more the grass grows into you, the more Joe Mayo sounds like a genius. I'm going to study that for a fact.
I was just gonna say, there's a lot of different thoughts out there about how you do different things, and like when you were just talking about speed a minute ago, you said swing faster going back. Like I can remember hearing years ago that if you wanted, tour players saying, if I want to get some more yardage out of a driver, I'm gonna go slower. So how do you decide when you're gonna adopt maybe something new in your philosophy or something just different?
So if I'm going to adopt something, it has to be rooted in something real, substantiated, right? So we know that if I, let's say, speed up my backswing, then I have to apply a larger force to that golf club late backswing to slow it down and change direction. So I'm going to create a larger impulse if my backswing's faster. It's just physics, it's mechanics, right? So to me, that's a legitimate thing to do. It's funny enough, there's a video of Victor and I in Dubai. He's talking about swinging like some JM, makes a really slow backswing. We're doing it as a drill. And then like everybody's like, this is the way to do it. You gotta slow down the backswing, you gotta make it smooth, and there's a drill. So to me anyway, if I'm gonna adopt something, it has to be rooted in something tangible, something measurable.
Everybody's teaching existing players. So as an industry section, how do you start? So if you guys were all starting new golfers, probably a high percentage of that new golfer would become a golfer. There's a lot of new golfers that start and then they quit. So what's your view on, how do we start golfers doing? Like, who should be teaching them golf? Where do you go?
I can start. I think that if you get them to hit the ball solid with some awareness of where that ball's going to start, I've gone on record and say I teach every player exactly the same. I don't use the same words, but it is not my position to say that person will be at the highest level of golf or not. So I have a bunch of little kids, 4 little girls, and I'm going to teach them the same way I want them to be taught if they're on the LPGA tour. So we're going to start with making sure they've made contact with the golf ball. I'm going to make sure that thing will go relatively towards the target, and then we'll figure out how to get that ball to probably curve a little more productively, and then we're going to figure out how fast we can do that. But in my opinion, I'm going to get them to hit all the ground with an iron and teach them to miss the ground with a driver, and get them some awareness that length of stroke and tempo probably plays a role in putting. But I know what the grip is. I'm also a middle school golf coach. I had someone come to the team the other day and ask what the numbers on the bottom were, and I thought that was a great question. Let's start there. So, but I would say systematically, it's kind of the same idea. I don't believe that just because someone's good, that they should be starting to be taught something different. That's my opinion.
I would just say, like, the easier you make it up front, you give them a reason to want to come back. Like, we gotta see success. So, you know, if it's put the ball in the tee, just so it makes it a little easier to get the ball in the air, because that's what everybody wants to do, right? So, like, no kid wants to sit there for an hour and top it and shank it and make it off the walls. Come to my building, you'll see there's plenty of balls in the wall. But we want to see success, and that's what it's going to drive that clarity from that. So, anytime that you're working with somebody, you make it too complex, and you're like, okay, we're going to spend 15 to 20 minutes with a 9-year-old working on grip, like they're nothing, right? They're out the door. So, get them to hold it, modify the grip, as we kind of go along. Like, let them kind of, again, it's kind of knowing the clientele, right? So it's building that relationship first, and I think once you do that, then you've got a lifer, you've got somebody that's going to continue to come back for a while. BTJ, believe.
So kind of in line with what Ben and Brian said, the only thing I would add is, right, so you create a hierarchy of skill sets, hierarchy of needs. This is what I think is important. So I would agree with Ben, hitting it solid, having a modicum of control over direction. And then along with what Brian said, to me, a watershed moment to developing a golfer is when they keep scoring. That's an important part of becoming a golfer, right? So you want to make the challenge point easy enough, like Brian said, so that it's fun. So like, you know, if you've ever done Op 36, we do Op 36. Brian and Matt are really good friends of mine. I've seen every iteration of that program since its inception. And like that's the best thing you can do. Get somebody on a golf course, they can score, make it manageable. It's a watershed moment to develop a golfer.
I can't remember the last time I gave a lesson like that. But here's how I view it. I'd still say the number one thing is speed. Because speed equals the contact that feels the best. So I would probably say, outside I would teach them vaguely how to hold on to it. You know, how good can you wind up and how well can you balance and finish with as much speed as you can. And let them enjoy hitting it as hard as they can hit it. That sounds fun to most people, and that's how I would probably start there almost always. I would probably never start with a putter, and I would probably never spend a whole lot of time talking about things that don't have anything to do with not hitting it really hard. That's how I do it.
Okay, so I'm gonna be the last one, and then when I get done with kind of the questions from the panel and from you as well, we'll take some general questions, just overall kind of state of teaching and where we are, and we'll probably finish a few minutes early. My philosophy actually stems with the start of I believe in hitting good golf shots. Many people, when you ask them to define good, they actually tell you great. And so I define a good golf shot as an inside tour average for a given skill set. I believe that you can apply that area or zone, as I like to call it, through two different lenses. You can look through the manage lens, which is how to apply for the best average score, or through the maximize lens, how to leverage the best opportunity to make the lowest score. I believe in predictable shots that go a predictable distance. I don't really care if my players fade or draw the golf ball, though I think sometimes people think I do. player and develop speed from the player head to the ball. So I ultimately believe in hitting good golf shots. I believe that is done by the player owning the why. My background is in mechanical engineering and from a player's perspective as well, and so that drives my belief in the why. But ultimately, I want them to own it, why they do what they do, to execute to their zone, to be the best version of themselves. That's what I teach. Virgil, will let you get started.
Well, I know you like to use a lot of obstacles when you coach and training aids and what have you. And knowing that you've come from one of my favorite teachers, Bender, as your one of the most important mentors in your life. How would you say that the training aid situation really helps your model when it comes to how you see and want your players to perform? How has that been such a help to you?
Yeah, so I don't love the word model. I like to use this terminology. It's kind of the same idea, but I call them negotiables and non-negotiables. And yes, I spent 3.5 years working for Mike Bender, running his junior academy. So I'm very fortunate to call him my good friend. He's a better person than his teacher. So, and obviously learned a lot of this from him. But I would say one of the biggest differences between Mike and I is I have more negotiables than he does. When it comes to non-negotiables, I think we all have them. I think that truly is what we are when we think of models. And I think the training aids play a role into that. So when I look at players and how they can improve, I think there's 4 ways to train. I think there is what I would call the old school approach. If a player's struggling to get his weight forward, go put him on a down slope. I think that has a lot of value. I think a lot of our younger teachers are not equipping themselves enough with things that we did prior to cameras, prior to force plates, prior to all this stuff. It's my big encouragement for younger instructors. Those old school methods still have a lot of purpose and value. I think you can train through what I would call gym-like exercises, be it a rehearsal or things actually in a gym to change motor patterns. I think there are feedback tools like sticks and noodles that you can use to know if you did something right or wrong with feedback. And I think there are training aids that assist and resist. The most classic one I think is the putting arc. If you slide your putter up and down a putting arc, that is assisting you doing the right thing. So the reason I am such a big believer in training aids and training through all 4 styles that I view as ways of training is one of my most common questions, probably people that I've taught for a number of years get very tired of me asking is, okay, tell me what that felt like. I believe that I don't know what any of my players feel. I can give them insight on maybe how I felt that or what I've heard from other players, but I truly want to understand what they feel. And so I believe those training aids provide us opportunities for them to own their feels. Ultimately, it's about executing those feels under pressure, and I think training aids are one aspect of that. It is a big part of how I train. I would say initially in owning a mechanic in kind of the way my brain organizes it, is your mechanics are what you do. Your skills, your ability to adapt your mechanics to a situation. Competition is your ability to adapt your skill to a one-off situation. So I believe those training aids have a place. I think they are at the starting of that big, long curve, being able to do it under pressure in competition. And that's why I leverage them. But I would say if you go talk to a lot of my guys that I've taught for a number of years, it's always like the great thing when you look around and you're like, wait, there's nothing around me anymore. That must mean I'm hitting it pretty good. So yes, I believe a lot in them. But again, I think it's an avenue to an end, not a crutch to allow them to.
So I know with Bender, he talks a lot about these zones, and I remember listening to him years ago talk about the difference in handicaps and that change based off of skill level?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And so I would say my definition of good doesn't change. So maybe that's a change between Mike and I think that zone is the same for every player. I think the definition of good doesn't change because you're a 12 handicap or because you're a tour player. I think the likelihood of hitting that good shot changes. And so I think then, and this is probably where my verbiage maybe starts changing from Mike's, is I call it in position or acceptable misses. And so when you look at a zone, the zone then has a range of what we call acceptable or in position misses. And so those acceptable or in position misses will probably change for a given player with the club they have, given the situation, so be it out of the rough, the fairway, uneven line, hard wind direction of some kind, but also for the player. So go back to my 9-year-old daughter, her zone with a 100-yard shot is still going to be 5 yards wide. I want her to know what good looks like from the beginning. Her acceptable position, because she's 9, is going to be really big compared to, say, a college player. So the likelihood of them hitting it good is going to be obviously way less. But I also want them to know that when you did that, that was just as good as a tour player. And so you talk about beginner golfers and that light bulb, get them to come back moment. I think when they see that, I think that encourages them. So to me, the size of the zone doesn't change. 100-yard shot is still 5 yards wide. But the likelihood obviously changes and then that what we call in position or acceptable would vastly change between players.
You have a lot of training aids.
I do.
How do you prevent a player from becoming too reliant on a training aid?
That's a phenomenal question. I think it starts with letting them understand why we're even using the training aid in the first place. And I think that's one of the challenges we have is what is even the value and why are we even using this? And ultimately, what are we trying to get to? One of the things I've said to my players a lot is the best swing thoughts equate to golf shots. And so I want everything ultimately to be related to a golf shot. And be it a trajectory, a curve, a mimic of something they might have seen before. But that's really what we're trying to do. And so if they're using a training aid to just change a movement pattern, ultimately I have failed as a teacher because I have failed to help them understand why they're even using that in the first place. And so the reliance of a training aid, I think ultimately relies on the front end of allowing them to understand we're trying to create this golf shot. That golf shot, we believe, would be better done if this action happened. That's why we're using this to produce that. And so if they're not seeing the training aid leading to a golf shot, then yeah, that's a big problem. That's my fault. I failed them as a teacher because I haven't clearly stated to why we're using that. But yeah, I think there's a big challenge a lot of times with certain personalities with dependence on, because they want it to look a certain way instead of just stepping back and going, what am I actually trying to do with this golf ball? And that's probably stems from me more the player, growing up without a driving range and just playing a lot of golf, not getting a lot of golf instruction as a kid. So a lot of wiffle balls in the backyard, curving it around the house. So I think, yeah, training aids, again, they have their place. They're part of the equation. If they're viewing that training aid as a solution, then it's my fault as a teacher to not give them the ultimate solution, which is a ball flight.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, training aids are an awareness tool because the brain loves to know where it can and can't go, which is why we have white lines and yellow lines and stop signs on the road because of the Wild West. When you're just going through the desert, there's no direction, you have no spatial awareness. But as soon as you find out that this piece of foam that you strategically put in the way of their tendency, they become very aware of it. Oh my God, that's where my golf club's going. So awareness, that's why think you do a great job with them, with the training aids, because you create a level of awareness that they aren't aware of in space while moving in 3D and as fast as they can move.
Yeah, and I would say that training aids also, at times, right, can, you know, I've always kind of joked, I probably had TrackMan longer than everybody else, but I probably also used it as little as anybody else. So, be it video, be it TrackMan, be it 3D, I've used a lot of those to help show the value of a training aid. But I think, like you said, the spatial awareness piece is a really interesting one. Awareness is really hard. And one of the fascinating responses I get is when someone swings in a fashion, they say don't hit a noodle or don't do something. I don't love using that word, but use that for the context of this conversation. But they avoid a noodle and their swing direction goes from -7 to 0, and now their path is to the right. They hit a draw for the first time in a really long time. We now know that that's producing a certain desired outcome. So, yeah, I think training aids, again, they're really, really interesting. But then you get the answer, well, I don't know how I just did that. Well, that's the important part. That's what we got to dive into, because training aid can actually make you do something. You did something. We just got to figure out what that is.
Yeah, I always use the term, I don't like exaggeration, so I always say, let's get to where you're not, so we can feel where you want to be. So when you're using training aids, so we'll just stay on this topic for a minute. Based off of feel, how do you do that? So like, let's say, I love obstacles, but I don't like teaching aids. Meaning I don't like stuff that you strap on your body, because I feel like it creates a fixed position where, you know, it's forcing a player to do something as opposed to letting them feel and experience something different. So how do you take it from the level of that the teaching aid is forcing it to happen versus are they truly feeling that?
Yeah, so I think that's why I wanted to start with that explanation how I saw it play out. So what you're referring to is the assist-resist training aids produce possibly the given result. So we'll give maybe a classic example in this case of someone strapping someone's arms together, because we feel like the internal rotation of the trail arm creates a negative domino effect in their golf swing, which causes them to get undone. We have them use a strap to hold their arms together. Well, that would be a training aid that assists the action that we ultimately want. Less internal rotation, maybe, you know, passive to maybe some external, between a ball between the arms, which would be a different one. Now you can go a step further. There are now balls, like we use one, TRS makes one that has Velcro on it, right? So technically they could get off of it and on it, it's more. So all three of those, I think, produce different things. I would say I very rarely, or I very quickly would want to get out of assist-resist. I would use probably assist-resist, literally strapping their arms together, to even see if that was the right path to go down. If we film that in the data, in the TrackMan, ball flight, say, ooh, that does positively affect yours. So now we know we're on the right path to changing it to the desired ball flight that you want. Then I would quickly go to, say, a ball between your arms, or, like I said, I like the one where they know if they're on or off the ball, but the ball's going to stay there no matter what. So, yeah, I think, ultimately, assist-resist training aids have a place. It's just a very, very small window that I think they work. And again, I use the putting arm as the best example. The putting arm for sure has a place for certain players if they need to understand why that shape, that path to their putter would be more desirable. But I think a putting mat with obstacles ultimately is a better way to train. So we might use that ball between the arms, strap, whatever, as a way of describing why that is a good, valid way of answering the problem at hand. But ultimately, yeah, training aids that literally assist in action, I think, are very, very limited in their scope and use should be held at a minimum. You have anyone? What did you think? Questions from the audience?
So this is for the whole panel,
I like those questions the best.
and maybe even a little bit more at Virgil in a sense of having the home set up. How do each one of you get your players in a situation on the golf course to practice? And I would say like, especially tournament players, whether it be juniors, tour players, I mean, obviously tour players, you're gonna be able to see that probably a little bit more practice round wise and watching tournaments, like you can see that part of it, but like, how do each of you get on the golf course with your students and or watch them play tournaments, like how does that work in your own world?
I say we start, Virgil, you can start, and we'll work our way down.
Oh, man, so look, I'm just gonna try to answer this question the way I think I heard it, okay? So, I do my playing lessons at West State, or the club that person's a member at, okay? I love to do the first playing lesson in my sim, so that I can use decade information, and I can play 18 holes in an hour and 30 minutes, never lose a ball, have TrackMan data inform me of what's going on, and it is unbelievable how different people swing when it's just a performance shot versus for video, right? When it comes to traveling with kids, and watching them play, I think that it's an important thing. It's kind of a cost negative for the teacher, for sure, but depending on the type of client you're dealing with, it may be a net positive. But I like playing, like have my players play 2 balls and play a worst ball scramble, so to speak, to train adaptability, to train perseverance. Because when they gotta play the worst shot of the 2 for 9 holes, they're exhausted. I mean, they're mentally gassed. But that's really one of the things that I'm a big believer in, is that I gotta find that place out pretty quickly. Like, where are they competitively in their mind, and how quickly are they disrupted from generally being able to think clearly on their feet while being pressured. I hope that answers your question, but I mean, at the end of the day, that's generally my progression.
Yeah, I've done that. Where they play 2 balls and they have to play the worst shot all the way through the green. So if they make a 20-footer, they've got to make it again for the count. They start over, or they just play the worst ball. But I heard Alaska tell the story one time. He said that when he was back trying to play, that his pro told him, he said, "We're going to play 9 holes, and I bet you can't break par if you do over $100." And he's like, "Whatever." He said, "It's not a problem." He said, "Here's the deal though. Every hole I need to throw your ball one time." He goes, "I won't throw it out of play. I'll just throw it." And he's like, "Okay." So he said, first hole, he pounds the ball down the middle of the fairway, and this little instructor grabs his ball and throws it back like 45 yards in the rough underneath the tree. $100 on the line. He bears down, hits the shot at 6 feet. Continues this throughout the round. So at the end of the round, his pro said, "Okay, before I hand you this $100 because you started it," he goes, "Would you have done that had you hit those shots off the tee?" And so it creates a different level of mentality, because you're going from, I've got to perform because there's a reward at the end, versus there's not the reward of just like, I'm gonna win, I'm gonna get a trophy or whatever. He said, "Would you have stayed in that same mind frame?" And he said at that point in time he started teaching a little bit different. He started thinking, well, he was playing at that point in time, so it wasn't really teaching. But later on, as he started teaching, he said he began to teach that same way. So when I heard that story, I started doing the same thing with my players on the golf course. And we're truly trying to play competitive golf. So it creates a different environment because they've hit a great shot, but then now they got a bad bounce. And so it keeps them from worrying about, oh my gosh, I just hit it perfect, and the ball hit the sprinkler head, now it's over in the rough, or it's in the bunker. I just missed it, and he was 6 inches further, and now I'm grading it up.
So tournament prep for collegiate players, amateurs, kids is one thing. And unfortunately, due to time constraint, financial constraints, the only people I really get to see play are tour players. One thing that I started doing last year, which I thought would offer a unique perspective, is I started caddying for players. One player in particular. And what an insight it is to be discussing the environment, the shots, the mindset, the strategy with a player kind of in situ, right? Like in the situation. And like I had an idea of what this player was probably like on the golf course, but caddying for him was incredibly eye-opening. So
How about Bermuda?
when I threatened to quit Thursday, Friday.
Thursday and then Friday.
So we were in Bermuda for the PGA Tour last fall. I was caddying for Chris Baker. Might as well throw the name out there. Ben was playing.
You would know Chris Baker's name if he wasn't crazy and he could play.
And he's a lunatic. He's
But he's arguably
the best ball hitter I've ever seen.
Ever seen.
Ever seen.
And you've never heard his name.
You can quote me. Ever seen. This kid's too good. It's unbelievable. It's a joke. So caddying
You've
for
seen him
Bermuda.
hit 18 greens how many times? Oh.
Dozens. I mean, he's the best ball hitter I've ever seen. That includes everybody. So I caddied for him in Bermuda, and he shot four over on Thursday with 4 3 putts, and just went full eject. Like we're on the 4th hole, and he like hit an average shot and just went full eject. And just I'm quitting, I'm getting out of golf. I mean, like everything you could throw at it. I think I threatened to quit at some point on that front nine too. But you know, like we had a really good conversation. We came back out, talked about it. He comes back out and he shot 7 under on Friday, and like that's a pretty unique perspective to go through the constant emotions with the player, the ups and downs, the highs and lows. That just offered a really interesting vantage point that I never would have had if I hadn't been in that situation. So I've learned a lot more about the players and what they do on the golf course. Because as a coach, like you can't be, for the most part, in there, right? Like if you're a college basketball coach, you can call the timeout, you can talk to the team during the game, right? But for the most of us, we don't have that ability, and it's an incredible perspective. So I learned a lot just from doing that.
So I have a very friendly agreement with our club. West Haven's great. I always say if you want to get on the golf course, book the 9 o'clock lesson, back nines. Maintenance has already gone through. The league group hasn't caught to the 10th tee yet. So the 9 a.m. and the 5 p.m. lesson, I've kind of openly said to my players, when it's time and we need to get on the golf course, that's when we're going to do it. I do leverage some of the same things that Virgil said with course management. I personally think decades a little lazy. So to have that conversation using some of the features on TrackMan to talk through situational golf, I do think you can get a lot in. Obviously it's not the same, but it is probably the middle point between being on the golf course and doing it. I'm also a middle school and high school golf coach, so some of my kids I literally get to be on the golf course with. It's a huge advantage being their coach. I know when I was coaching at the university level, it was such a unique perspective to be able to be on both sides of that. So there's a handful of kids I do get to see play competitively way more often than others. I have done a caddy thing for my player. I would greatly encourage that if you get a player who's playing golf for a living to do that at least once a year. I would echo everything you just said. It's really, really eye-opening, and really helps you kind of better live life and go and be on the journey with them. So I would say that, again, I'm lucky to have a good club that allows me some time on the golf course, but I do think it's the biggest hindrance in our teaching world right now is the ability to be on a golf course. And I don't have a good answer for that unless someone has some land for us to build a teaching only facility that we can just go and do that on. That'd be great. But yeah, I think it is one of the biggest challenges we all have as teachers being on a golf course because our golf courses, and it's great, are very, very busy post-COVID.
The only thing I wanted to add that I forgot to talk about is in the mindset department of golf, there's a stop sign that you can turn right and be in an avoidant mindset, or you can turn left and be in a pursuant mindset. So I came up with a game a long time ago that Brant loved, and he did it all the time, which I turned the game from trying to shoot a score to trying to accrue as many points as you could. So I gave 2 points for hitting a fairway, 1 point for hitting it into a playable position from the rough, -2 for all penalized shots or obstructed shots. Same thing, hitting greens, what have you. And then I give a point for a 1 putt, 1 point for an up and down, a momentum point for a birdie, 2 momentum points for an eagle. You know, subtract 3 points for a double or worse. And at the end of the round, you add up your points, subtract from your score, and the lowest total wins. So I used to have a junior tournament called the Higher Performance Cup, and Brant won it all 4 years that I had it, but he didn't shoot the lowest score ever. But he played the way that you're supposed to play, and the pursuant, he was just trying to get points. And on the 15th hole to the 18th hole, all points triple. Because I want you to finish strong, and that's also when the chips are down the most. So the ability to shift the mind from trying to avoid something to trying to get something is really powerful. So when I give that game to my players, it's amazing how when they do it right, and they try to get as many points as they can, I've not really ever seen any of my players struggle. But it's when they start trying to avoid areas, interference kicks in. Pursuant keeps you focused on what you want. Avoidance brings in interference.
Guys, I'm so thankful for you guys, to stick around at the back end of the annual meeting. To these gentlemen, I don't know many talks or sections that are willing to have a group of guys come up and ask hard questions. So I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you all as well, and we look forward. We'll probably be sticking around a little bit if you have any more questions for us individually. But thank you, and have a good rest of your